today is the return of a special guest who was one of the first actual guests on this show, I'm proud to say. Jordan Daniel is a local musician. He's a thinker, a thinking man, modern-day philosopher, I'd say, and he's returned to the studio today to talk about a talk that he's giving on January 9th, along with his partner Colleen, in regard to ayahuasca. So Jordan previously made music under the name The Boogeyman Jordan Daniel, and he's put that incarnation aside, and he's currently known as Supernatural River. So let's welcome Supernatural River and Colleen. Hello, guys.
Hello. Thank you for having us, Matt. Good to see you again, my friend.
You too. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm excited to hear what is going on in the life of Jordan, because ayahuasca is something that it's in the public consciousness now. I know very little other than that it's a fascinating herb, I guess, from South America.
Yeah, what it is it's a combination of two plants, which is the ayahuasca vine or the chacruna leaf, and on a chemical level, what that is called dimethyltryptamine and an MAO inhibitor, so something that allows the dimethyltryptamine into your system in order for you to have an experience from the plant. And basically, I've been interested in psychedelics for a long time, and I went down to Peru a year ago now in search of this experience and did basically as much of it as I could while I was down there, and it was a life-transforming experience. And now I just want to kind of open up the conversation to people through this event, and I've met this amazing woman that I have in my life now that is going to share in the experience with me of just opening the conversation about what psychedelic plants can do for the expansion of human consciousness.
That's brilliant. You actually went straight to the source, pretty much.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Well, this is news to me. That's amazing. You're really speaking from lived experience, and having used the substance with what is the tradition around that? Like a shaman, was it with the shaman? Or?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of that depends on the perspective of the culture right now. So for a modern shaman is just the person that exists within the culture that has the most amount of experience with these plants. In our culture, that's not much to be said at all, so there's not a lot of great shamans inside of North American culture. I myself am a very horrible shaman, but I'm trying to become a better one.
Oh wow! So well, exactly, and let's face it, we're living in a culture where this is still taboo. Ayahuasca is still classed as something that is not in the medical mainstream, despite the well-known physician in this city who's spoken very fondly of it, Gabor Mate.
Yeah, big fan of Gabor. Yeah.
I mean, who could ignore that guy? Well, our government.
Yeah.
Which is pretty ridiculous, but it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting things to say, both yourself and Colleen. Colleen, how did you encounter ayahuasca?
Actually, I'd been wanting to do it for years before I met Jordan. It started as a teenager. I started reading Terence McKenna. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've heard the name.
He's a psychedelic philosopher, my hero.
Yeah, he's an ethnobotanist. He was on the forefront of enlightening people about the psychedelic movement. So I read about ayahuasca in one of his books, and then I kind of just romanticized about it and fantasized about it forever. And then I met Jordan this summer, and he was talking about doing ayahuasca. And he told me that I had the opportunity to do it, and so I did it. And it was probably the best experience of my life, to be honest.
You're alluding to it now, but I guess more detail will come out in the talk on the January 9th at Lana Lou's. I think participants are in for a treat because you have lived experience with both of you, and combined with your psychological education as well. You're currently studying counseling psychology.
Yeah, and through the experience, it kind of changed my philosophical perspective on what it means to be a human being. And there's so much healing potential. I'm sure you hear about that in the media all the time, about the healing potential of psychedelics. It's become kind of a trendy thing right now. But from a personal experience, you can feel yourself healing in the experience, which is fascinating.
And one of the cool things about this is the field that she's coming from. Inside of the tribal community, the psychologist was the shaman. He would also, would forecast the weather for the next week and had the ability to lift up this veil that's in front of our eyes, which is the filtering of reality. Our eyes aren't seeing everything, our ears aren't hearing everything, and it's by ingesting these psychedelic substances that the filters are opened up to the realer reality as we would perceive it, which is just the reality that's a broader spectrum of the electromagnetic light that's around us all the time. And that's a part of the philosophy that we're going to dip into during the talk as well.
The Eastern view and Indigenous view that we are all connected, which is really practically hard for a lot of us because of our ego structure and competition. So it sounds like if more and more people did take this sort of journey, then
exactly
actually living oneness in a practical way might be easier.
What the psychedelic experience does is it dissolves boundaries. It's ego dissolution, so that you don't see yourself connected to the planet. You become the planet, you become the solar system, and you feel that connection as though you didn't even exist before. And then the ego is reborn again because we need to have it in order to experience the experience that we're having.
I see. Okay, so it seems like, I honestly don't know a lot about psychedelics and things like LSD, but I was thinking of like Timothy Leary.
Absolutely.
Went off on about LSD, and unfortunately the results weren't so great for a lot of people. So it sounds like ayahuasca is a more natural way of kind of doing what he was trying to do.
It's a much gentler experience too. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a really intense experience, but the anxiety isn't there in the same way it is with a lot of other psychedelic drugs. It's got a really, I want to say, feminine energy to it. Even in comparison to magic mushrooms, it's a lot easier on people emotionally, I felt. Even though during my last experience I spent the majority of the time crying, coming out of it, you always feel as if you're healing in it.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the same thing can't happen with magic mushrooms. It's just people don't use these medicines in a shamanic practice anymore. They take them while they go to a Halloween party, and you're asking for a bad time when you do these things wrong. It's going to show you a reflection of yourself in a very large way, and if you're not prepared to confront that reflection, then you're going to have a bad trip and you're going to have a bad time. But when you surrender to the teaching of it, it's always going to be cathartic and it's always going to be healing.
It sounds like a very fascinating talk, and I think very timely, given, as we've spoken about, Gabor Mate, and I know, Jordan, we met each other working in the downtown east side and a community of people who are quite distressed. And do you see the healing potential in that kind of community?
Yeah, for sure. Like, people, the thing about this medicine is you shouldn't think of it as a cure for alcoholism or a cure for an opiate addiction. What it is it gives you an overhead perspective of your life and the choices that you're making and how you're destroying your body, and you see how that impacts the people around you in your family and in your community, and you realize that it's your responsibility to overcome this hurdle that's been put in front of you. And it just allows you more of an overhead perspective of how to do that, of how to form new patterns in your life and get rid of old patterns.
And with Colleen here, you've studied psychology in depth, and I guess a lot of that is about revisiting past and why things happen, but ayahuasca doesn't really invite too much of that rumination, I guess, on why, or your parents, or things like that.
It's more of an existential drug, actually. What it does is it reveals the way that you think to your thinking process. So what it does is it confronts you with how you're structuring your life, and that in a way breaks the structure down. So once you see sort of the raw data of your life, it makes it easier to put back together in a way that is more beneficial and empowering for you. I believe, at least.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The details will be revealed at the talk on the January 9th at 7 p.m. at Lanaloo's. That's on Pender Street, where Colleen and Jordan will talk in detail about your experiences.
Sorry, Matt, is this yours?
Oh no, but oh my god, that's totally relevant to my. It's just dropped into my Australian Aboriginal music. I'm actually curious myself, coming from Australia. I've just really brief research I've done about ayahuasca is there is native plants in Australia, and I don't know about the quote-unquote movement there, but presumably the Australian Aborigines were onto this a long time ago.
Every Aboriginal culture has been onto this way before us, including the Egyptians. You know, I think in large part why they were able to develop in such a way to build these monolithic structures that we still don't know how they built is because they were connected to the mind of the universe through these plant substances that dissolve that ego of saying, you're not the universe, you're Jordan, you're not the universe, you're Matt, but really both of us are a part of this ever unfolding, ever creating pattern that keeps going and going and going. But the ego structure is what allows us to experience it as ourselves in this form.
And I like what you said before about, you know, after you do have this experience, you still return to the ego in some sense because you still need it. And so I guess the idea is you see it for what it is and not have it control you.
Well, you understand that the ego is constantly changing, so you can't get fixated on yourself as a certain type of person because the game's called evolution. It keeps evolving over and over and over, and I'm not the same person I was before I came into this interview 10 minutes ago. I've changed, I've learned just from interacting with you and Colleen and the like.
It really brings you into context. You realize that yourself isn't just the context of your body and your memories. Everything in this room is part of yourself. So you're going to have to change as you move through time and space.
That's right. And I study a lot of the metaphysics of India, the philosophy of yoga, and it can get quite abstract and complicated, but the essence of it is that we're built of the 5 elements in nature.
Exactly,
Our bodies are earth, fire, water, air, ether. And we're all, and
as
that,
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young put it, we are stardust, we are golden, we are billion-year-old carbon, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us back to music, and of course, you're in a different incarnation than you were 2 years ago when we spoke, which is the Boogeyman Jordan Daniel, and now Supernatural River is your latest project. How can you describe your current sound and how has that evolved along with your journey?
Well, my sound is constantly expanding. Now I'm branching out into doing hip-hop tracks, to doing folk tracks, to doing stoner metal tracks. Whatever I release musically is going to come out under the name Supernatural River. That's the brand that I'm marketing at this point, if you want to call it that. But really it's just the metaphor that I have a stream of consciousness, and when I share that stream of consciousness with other streams of consciousness, we become a river of consciousness. And through music and through art and through philosophy and through talking to people, I'm hoping to create that supernatural river of consciousness for all of us to flow into the ocean of consciousness, which is the unfolding utopia of tomorrow.
I like it. I can't help but think, like the polar opposite of this view is sort of like something like Kiss, Kiss is a great band, but think about trying to lock down an image like that's unchangeable in 30 years.
Yeah.
The pressure and the money and energy that takes to keep that locked down, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? Whereas it's, there's not a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot of movement there. With something like what you're presenting, it just allows for movement and this natural.
Yeah, and they were a product of their era. You needed to have something to sell to people and a packaging to sell it. But now with the internet, people are interested in so many different forms of music. Then why is it wrong for one artist to want to branch into all of these different categories? Because all genres are becoming one genre again, just like we're becoming one consciousness again. That genre is just music. That's what it is. We all like hip-hop and old blues and shit like that. That's why we're called hipsters, is because there's no one genre for us to grab onto.
With my radio show here, I try to keep it as a flow, and what comes to me I play. For instance, as an example, I walked into the studio today, and right here was an Australian album sitting right here, spider bait from 10 years ago, and I'll play it today because it's here. It's come into my circle of my being, and even if I'm not the hugest fan, I'm going to honor it because it's here.
Oh, exactly.
And it'll flow through, and then
you
open
introduced
to experience.
You introduced me to Beasts of Bourbon. That when we met 2 years ago in this studio or whatever. Well, we didn't meet at that point, but I came in, and they became one of my favorite bands for a period of time. You know?
Exactly. And it's there somewhere in who knows, in two months some chord progression is going to come out of you, and you've no idea, and it might have been influenced by that, and you don't know.
For sure.
And that's how it is. It's funny with like people get nitpicky about plagiarism in music sometimes, and someone like Bob Dylan, the greatest genius of our time in music, and he lifted, quote unquote, lifted things, but it was...
He stole his entire persona from Woody Guthrie. His whole personality he stole for a period of time anyways.
Yeah, it's truly a fascinating journey. Anyone who's touched by music... I should say too, I couldn't help but think the evolution of the passing of time. I bought a Boogeyman shirt at this show that you did it was a fundraiser for the Red Gate closing. It was this tie-dyed Boogeyman shirt.
I remember that.
And a year or so in, it literally started. It fell apart.
Evaporated.
It evaporated. It literally. I don't know what happened. I put the wrong chemicals in the wash or something.
It's because I made those with bleach. I made the tie-dye on it with bleach, so it just like eats away at the shirt eventually. Thing is temporary.
It is. I thought that was perfect. It's like the Boogeyman was dissolving at that point, and that incarnation is no more.
Yeah, the shirt died when my old ego structure did.
That's seriously, like it did.
Yeah.
So Jordan, it's been fantastic having you, and Colleen. Now we have a track here too. What can you tell us about this?
I believe it's called Death Rattle, the one that I gave you, and that's a part of the psychedelic experience, especially with ayahuasca, is the shaman will sing a song and he'll play his rattle while you're undergoing this ego death, and you see what's known as a glossolalia, which is the song takes a visual representation inside of your vision while it's happening. And these songs, they're called Icaros. They're sacred songs that the shaman sings, and it kind of brings you back into reality a little bit to let you realize, okay, I'm in this room with this person, it's all safe, it's all good, and brings you back to the moment, because the visions can get very intense sometimes, and you perceive yourself as being in some sort of a reality outside of this one, but it just reminds you that you're back inside of this reality right here. So this song is called Death Rattle.
Okay, great. Well, we'll play it for the audience right now. I can't help but think, even just going back to, your previous incarnation of the Boogeyman based on blues and I think blues is still a great thing because it is still, even though there's a lot of fluctuation and emotions in singing, that progression is always going to be there, and I find that comforting. That
it's just a variation of that one thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's you can always go back to it, like you can always go back to the breath. Same
shit, different pile, as they
say. Exactly. Well, thank you, Jordan and Colleen. And Colleen has so supernaturalriver.com is where you can find more information about Jordan's music, and also Colleen has a blog, colleenknows.blogspot.com.
Yeah.
And what can we find there?
Essays,
It's just everything she's written down since she was...
There's 10 years of archives.
Old, yeah.
Well, interesting. And just as a reminder, Colleen and Jordan are speaking at Lanaloos on Pender Street in Vancouver on January 9th from roughly 7 p.m. Ayahuasca, a conversation about psychedelic plants and consciousness, with music by Supernatural River. And sounds fantastic, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
No problem at all.